Awesome. Okay, so hello everybody, I'm Jo Hutchinson. I am here today with the beautiful Bracha, one of the world's leading astrologers, certainly one of my favorite astrologers as well. Now, Bracha is not only an astrologer, she's a channeler, she's an author, she's a musician, a financial advisor, a spiritual coach, and she's been doing astrology for over 40 years. Welcome, Bracha.
Thank you very much, Jo, and thanks for reaching out to me. Yeah, the tone of your email was very heartwarming, and so thank you. And I'm delighted to be with you today. So fire away with your questions.
All right, so thanks for that, Bracha. So I've invited Bracha to talk with us today to tell us a story that she hasn't shared out on social media yet, but she has spoken about it. But I know there's so many followers here in New Zealand who follow Bracha and her amazing work. And I really wanted to see if we could get this story from Bracha, because I feel it's very relevant for what we're going through in our country at the moment. And so Bracha actually came to New Zealand last year and spent some time here, and I think had some very interesting experiences. So I've just got a few questions to ask her about that, if that's okay. And the first one was really, Bracha, what inspired you to come to New Zealand?
Well, I had already lived in New Zealand for several years previously, between 2006 and 12. And I had a real feeling, oh, it's time to go back to New Zealand. There's some unfinished business there. I didn't know what it was, but that's what it felt like.
Awesome. And you came, I think, while we were in lockdown, or you were in lockdown?
I came in October of 2020.
Okay, so we would have been out of lock because we've had different lockdowns over the time, but I think then it was relatively free in comparison to other parts of the world.
Yes.
So I was really curious to know how did you get here? Because I thought our borders were closed.
Well, fortunately, I am a Kiwi citizen. I am a New Zealand citizen, so I do have a passport from living there before. And so that was how I managed to get in, but the quarantine was pretty tough. Yeah,
definitely. 2 weeks in quarantine is not something you would wish on anybody. Yeah, and it's a long flight to go with that as well. Yes. So what was, like, when you came to New Zealand, where did you go and what was your experience here?
Wow. Well, where I went was to Auckland, because it was the only place that I could get to physically, initially, at least, all the way from Greece. I was quite frightened about going. It felt like a plane trip in the midst of a pandemic. Are you crazy?
Yeah.
And at that point, the widespread use of vaccines was not around. So it was just all these various PCR tests that you had to have. And so I went to Auckland. Previously, I was in Christchurch, I had lived, and I'd also lived in Kirikiri, which I loved as well. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. You've done North Island and South Island.
I have. I love them both.
Yeah, they're quite different, aren't they? So how did you find New Zealand? What happened while you were here?
Well, I had a lot of personal growth to go through. I had quite a few difficult experiences. My experience of the people, especially in quarantine, was actually very positive. I found everybody to be kind, to be helpful, to be, they were just good. You know, it was a difficult situation, and I felt that 99% of the time people did the best they could to make you comfortable and calm in that context. So that was that context. I found my experience of New Zealand coming from Greece. Remember, I hadn't lived in Greece before New Zealand last time. I was in England for many years. And then I suddenly went to New Zealand. So I had an English speaking to an English speaking context. And my first experience of New Zealand is, oh, they speak English. It's lovely. You know, it was like, oh, that's such a relief than struggling with Greek.
Yeah.
Because Greek's difficult. And I was avoiding learning Greek, I must admit. So I had initial relief. But I was quite shocked, or it was a shock to my system at how it's got quite a lot of rigid systems in New Zealand that I was not so aware of until I landed. And it was like, you know, I got a lot of speeding tickets. I got a lot of, you know, it was like just little things that I suppose I had taken for granted in Greece were very regulated. I got a sense of quite a regulated ambiance. I don't know if that makes any sense to you. Yeah.
No, well, it does, because I think what we're going through as a country right now is, I mean, that was almost, well, that's over a year ago, but what we're seeing happening now is far more than that. It's just the you know, the force and the regulations that are coming through are, I think, beyond what New Zealanders are used to, and are just sort of seeing something that they've never seen before. So I know we're going through a tremendous awakening, of course, around the planet, but I feel, you know, obviously New Zealand, we have our own karma and our own story and our own breakthroughs as a country. Yes. And for me, you know, when I think of the land here, the land is a volcanic land. It's full of that sort of fiery energy from below. I don't know if astrologically what we are. I think we might be a Capricorn's kind of a country, like an earth sign sort of a country. And so it lends itself to these significant shifts taking place. As you know, in Christchurch, the big earthquakes back in 2011 and beyond.
That's why I left Christchurch. Yes.
As many people did. And that was a shock as well. And so yeah, so it's interesting to hear what your experience was last year, because I know, like, from what I've heard in social media that you have shared, it was like, oh my God, I'm never going back there again. And we're like, what's wrong with our country?
I don't know. Your country's beautiful, and I love the people. I love, you know, I've got some dear friends there, many dear friends, and many new ones that I met as well while I was there. So, you know, fabulous. And you've got some wonderful healers.
Yeah.
Right? You have got some tremendous people who work with the healing arts in your country. I mean, I believe that you too are a healer and a writer, aren't you? Joe? So the land, there's the sacred, I mean, there's so much in New Zealand that is profound. It was just, I got this sense of like I was being watched all the time. And it was just like, and now when I see what's playing out there, I suppose I'm not surprised, but I was surprised in my person with this sense of rigidity. There was not much room. There wasn't like in Greece where we say, "Δεν πειράζει, don't worry, δεν πειράζει." Not so important. It's not such a big deal. Don't make a mountain out of a molehill. And just the housing situation was a very big thing for me in New Zealand. Yeah. And I found it rather unconscionable that there's so much difficulty with housing in such a beautiful country with very few people, largely.
Yeah.
So this was one of my greatest difficulties. I think I moved 13 times in 5 months.
Wow.
So it was very stressful. And I'm glad I went through it, because I began to feel what people who rent in New Zealand and maybe who want to buy go through, and the quality of the property on the market. And for the money that is expected and the legality of it, once you're signed in New Zealand, you can't get out of it, right? You're in. Woof. Yeah. And people don't necessarily know that.
No.
So that to me is something that I found strange in such a beautiful land, that there isn't the welcome of the actual housing stock to be able to accommodate even its own people. Does that make any sense to you? I don't know if that's something that resonates with you.
It's a really interesting point that you bring up, because I think it's absolutely right. I mean, the housing, especially here in Auckland where I live, is just ridiculously expensive. And I don't know, and the prices are just crazy, and houses have just sold like wildfire. And actually now, because Auckland has been locked down the most region of the entire country, people are just like, I'm leaving Auckland and going somewhere else. So that's kind of started a property boom in other towns as well. And again, it's the same problem. There's just these shortages. People over the last year have been reevaluating life and work and how all that works. And so people have gone, actually, I don't want to be in the city anymore, not necessarily just Auckland, it might be elsewhere. And so they're returning to some of the smaller regions and therefore creating the demand. And then there's housing issues there too. But I think it's really endemic of not just, we're just talking housing, but it's almost like everything that unfolds from that. It's like, you're right, there's all this sort of red tape and regulation that somehow has just kind of found its way into the New Zealand way of life. And it's interesting for you to point it out, because maybe we haven't really realized that, because we're not living in a place like Greece or some of the other countries where things are freer and easier. And so maybe this is part of our awakening journey right now. Is like, it's worse now than it was when you were here.
Let me just correct something. There is a lot of red tape in Greece as well. Okay, I'm not saying there's no bureaucracy here, otherwise the Greeks are going to come on me like a ton of bricks. For anybody, I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is that it is my sense that there is just not, in the emotionality of the people, there is not quite the same response to the rigidity that would like to be imposed upon it. I think, I don't know how to explain it, but it's more of a feeling. But yes, sorry. But
no, that's cool.
But it was just, I felt, even had I wanted to settle in New Zealand, it was just not meant for me. I had to learn some really difficult lessons around handling my anger and different issues that I needed to learn, some hard things, and complete on some of those things.
Yeah. And
I'm grateful that New Zealand offered me that space. And I always felt that New Zealand was a very safe country. And I'm being told now that in a way that's changing a little bit. And I would feel saddened if that is in fact the case. I don't know how you feel.
I don't know. I've never really thought about the safety issue, but I guess there's just a lot going on right now with the way things are rolling out, and potentially people's loss of freedoms and what that means. And that will definitely fire up some anger and some change. But it's kind of like we were talking before, it's like that a big awakening that's sort of happening everywhere. And I kind of think of New Zealand like we're going through our own sort of rebirthing. We're having to clean up some of our own issues that have been here for a long time, and they're just kind of playing out and catching people, I think, a little bit by surprise. But it's also, that's part of the journey. It's like we have to clear the land. We have to release what needs to be released, because New Zealand historically is the first country to see the light, the daylight. And so we have, the potential to play a beautiful role in helping to reawaken and relight up the world.
Totally. And first country to give women the vote. Yes.
Yeah, so we've done some pretty amazing things.
Amazing country. Amazing.
Pendulum seems to have swung all the way over to one extreme, and it hasn't found its way back to sort of find the middle point, which is why I was really curious to talk with you, because just to hear what your experiences were, it's nice to have that view from someone who's living abroad, and also with your background to kind of help shed some light on us, because as I said before, there's loads of people that follow your work here, and I know that they'll really enjoy this time we're spending together. Bracha, if you had a message for, oh, sorry, did I cut you off there?
Sorry.
Look like you've got...
Thank you, Jo. You're a very sensitive interviewer. You're going to do very well on your new YouTube channel. Do you want to tell us what it's called, your new channel?
Okay, thank you, Bracha. So I've been guided very much to set up a channel called the Consciousness Channel. And the Consciousness Channel is going to be doing interviews like this with some of our beautiful souls around the world who would love to share a little bit of their story and also bring some wonderful healing, teaching, and insights and wisdom. It's really a place for empowerment, and it's going to be a place to help people, raise their consciousness, raise their frequency, return to the heart, return to a place of love. And I think we're very blessed to have so many beautiful teachers like Bracha here to help us and guide us. I know one of the things I love about your work, Bracha, is that you use astrology, not so much in a predictive sense, but in a way to empower people. And I think, that's what it's all about. In the end of the day, it's how do we help to empower people through our different skills, talents, and gifts. So my last question for you, because I know it's late at night for you.
Well, just 1 minute. We will put a link to Jo's information, her books and everything will be in the description below, just so people will know how to reach you and contact you should they wish to. I hope I'm not putting you on the spot here. We didn't discuss this. But it's just how things go. So I'd like to ask you, please, Jo, so how are you coping? I can't imagine what it's been like, almost 3 months of lockdown in Auckland. How are you coping? How are you managing? How are you finding it?
Well, I think people have, like for me personally, I have my moments when I call it's like fatigue. It's like lockdown fatigue, where every day feels like the same day. I live on a beautiful island called Waiheke Island. I have beautiful ocean views. Yeah, I have the forest on my doorstep. I can do amazing walks from my house. I have no reason to complain about anything. I live in a beautiful sanctuary, and I'm so very lucky to have that. And I have wonderful neighbors as well. But even after all of that, it's like the day, I'm still in the same environment every day. And I discovered just recently, it was the lack of variety that kind of gives that fatigue. And I'm not like that all the time, but I'm aware of it. And then you see it playing out with other people as well. And eventually you kind of get used to it, because I've sort of gone, well, how do you make the most and the best out of this situation? For me, it's forced me to stop, because there's a lot of things I can't do. But then I think, well, what are all the things I can do? And so it's enabled me to go within. It's enabled me to have time to write, to rethink my work, to rethink where I want to go. To recognize that I think the 2020s is just such a dynamic and different energy to what we've been in the last 20 years. And it's changing very quickly as well. And so it's like being able to be fluid and adaptable. And so it is really about working on yourself and healing yourself and bringing more light and more love into things, and reframing things into the sense of love, seeing through the lens of love, and seeing, what is the purpose of, how can we make the most of this situation? What is the purpose? What is igniting here? So there is a big awakening happening, and I see it and I feel it and I sense it in the land here as well. And although there are moments where it's very constricting with some of the rules that are coming out, which make you go, oh, it feels, I can't breathe, it just feels a little bit constraining. But I also know that when the outer world is a reflection of the inner world. And so then I go, okay, so where is the restriction in me? What is actually constraining me? And how do I break through it? And so that's kind of what I think the gift of the time has been. And as there's that old saying that it takes 21 days to create a new habit. Well, after 4 months of lockdown, I don't know what it's like to go shopping anymore, because, it's just kind of not the thing I do anymore. So it's created a change in a different way, but it also reminds us of the importance of human connection, personal connection, being there for others, being able to support others, and how we can sometimes, in the previous world, we got so busy being busy that we just forget actually how important it is to say hello to a neighbour, to check in that they're okay. How nice it is to see someone that you know or don't know walking the streets and you're just saying, hi, how are you? Stopping for a conversation. The little things, I think, sometimes are the big things. And I think that's what's got me through the last 13, 14 odd weeks, is just those sorts of things, trying to use the time as best as I can to help and grow myself, to be able to support and help others, lot of time in nature, do a lot of healing work in nature, working with the land. It's just beautiful. So yeah, I'm in a pretty good space, I think, but definitely I know the energies are quite dynamic, and there's, you know, a lot to unfold yet. But it's exciting. You know, we've got to remember that it's an exciting time to be on the planet. There's a lot of good stuff happening on the planet. We may not always be seeing it, but it is there. And, you know, we're bringing together people in a new way. The connections of people, I think, that are happening now, you know, is even here in New Zealand, there's a lot of protesting happening. And those protests are just such a broad spectrum of society now. So people are starting to come together to stand for their rights or their freedoms, what they believe in, what they value. And we haven't seen that here in a long time in the way that it's kind of unifying people right now. So that's a good thing.
So thank you for sharing that, Jo. Yeah, I think that will be helpful to other people. And also now Europe is about to go into lockdown, or parts of it are going to lockdown. So that will just be helpful to many other people. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, sometimes we forget what's happening in other countries, you know, because we only sort of see what's going on in our little world and not actually the global picture. Yes. So yeah, we're all in this together. So I have one last question for you, if that's okay.
All right, absolutely. Fire away, Jo.
All right. So my last question for you is, what would be your message to the people of New Zealand, to the visionaries and to the light workers and to the new leaders, to people watching this video? If you had a message for the people of New Zealand, what would you say?
Oh, I'd just say, give thanks for the beautiful country that you live in, because it is beautiful. You do see that first light. You see the first sunlight. So stand up for what's important to you and keep the faith. Keep the faith that you're going to come through this better than ever. And each one of you is to shine your individual light. That's what I would say.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you so very, very much. Well, thank you very so much.
Lovely, Jo. I appreciate this opportunity to be with you. And I love Waiheke Island. It was the first place I went to when I got out of quarantine. So I love it. So
I wish I'd known that, because you could have come and stayed here. Honestly, it is a beautiful island. It has a different energy to Auckland, so that's why a lot of us choose to live here.
I said to my friend, I said, if there's one place I could live, it's Waiheke Island. So, but it wasn't meant to be, but we were destined to meet. So thank you very, very much, Jo.
Thank you, Bracha. It's been lovely talking.